Good morning, and welcome to the Africa Weekly Talk. Today's subject on the docket, the biggest and the greatest World Cup ever. The biggest and the greatest World Cup ever. And FIFA is laughing to the bank. And I don't blame FIFA. And no one should blame FIFA for laughing to the bank. I mean, this World Cup that was hosted by three countries: United States of America, Canada, and Mexico, has proven to be the best World Cup host countries ever. And there's not even dispute or even close to it. I mean, we're talking about a World Cup that grossed about $15+ billion. I mean, 15+ billion US Buffalo Bills. And guess what? The last World Cup that was held in Qatar, 2022, the oil-rich Middle Eastern countries, all that, stuff, grossed 7 point something $billion. So you're talking about this World Cup held in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, doubled what last World Cup of 2022 in Qatar brought in revenue. And outside of that, even you're talking about the money that people spent in the United States as well as Canada and Mexico, plus the hotels, the restaurants, and souvenirs, and how the world came together. The most important aspect of the beautiful game, bringing people from different walks of life together. And this World Cup pretty much exhibited that. It showed the world coming together, people from different parts of the world coming to the United States for the first time, or Canada or Mexico for the first time. But these people were welcomed by all these three countries. Because, I mean, prior to this World Cup coming to the United States and Canada and Mexico, and with Donald Trump coming back in office 2025, you had all this negative talk because of the clamp down on immigration and stuff, in the United States. You heard all this negative talk coming from most journalists from Europe and around the world, and including some liberal TV and journalists in the United States too. Talking about how Trump is making immigration so difficult and people are going to boycott. And as a matter of fact, there were people even calling for boycott because of Trump's immigration policies and so on and so stuff. So you had this negative, preconceived negativity towards the United States of America, in particular because of the immigration policies. So thinking that, with all this hoopla, all this talk, this World Cup is going to be boring and nobody is going to show up, and stadiums are going to be empty, and so on and so forth. I mean, that's all the talk. I mean, you had some European journalists betting that the United States, stadiums, wouldn't be able to hold, because we are used to having NFL, artificial grass stadiums and all that stuff. But guess what, fellas? When it came to the immigration stuff, the United States did not deny anybody entry into the United States to play here or to come in, as far as you had your valid visa and you went through the background checks and everything was good. They allowed everybody that's supposed to be here. No hustle, no problems, and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, the country that people thought was going to be most, welcoming to players and other people, Canada, was the very country that denied the Ghanaian British football player Partey entry visa to come and play in Ghana's game in Canada. So It wasn't the United States, it was Canada that denied party entry visa to come and play for Ghana in Canada because they said he has some, abuse issues or some court litigation going on in England and somewhere in Europe. So they couldn't allow that dude to come and play. But that dude played in the United States. The United States didn't deny him. They allowed him to play in the United States. But Canada denied him. But I didn't hear all this liberal media and the European countries talk about, oh, why would Canada do that, all that stuff, because at the end of the day, even Ghana filed an appeal. And the appeal was even still denied by the Canadian courts. The United States could have used the same legal argument against party not to play in the United States, but the United States didn't do that. They allowed every player from every country that is being represented in the World Cup to play in the United States with no problems. This was the very country that people were criticizing because of Donald Trump's immigration policy. But at the end of the day, the country that nobody talked about, Canada, was the one that denied a Ghanaian player entry visa to play in Canada. But having said all of that, everything went smoothly, with all the criticisms that was coming, preconceived negativity that had been spread all across Europe and other parts of the world because of the current immigration policies by Donald Trump. Everything went smoothly. And this World Cup is now considered the biggest and the greatest World Cup ever organized by FIFA. And FIFA raking in a lot of money, fellas, a lot of money. And then you hear these Europeans who came here, some of their journalists, sports journalists criticizing American football fields and all that stuff, coming to find out for the first time for themselves to see that what they had in Europe was child's play to the United States of American sporting events. And they realized that what they had in Europe was child's play, nothing. I mean, you're talking about European and most of the world, around the world, football stadiums, capacity of about average about 35,000, most about 40,000 capacity. In the United States of America, they saw themselves an average NFL stadium capacity is about 70,000. I mean, 70,000 capacity. That's what we are talking about. The massive, humongous stadiums. And all these stadiums are privately owned. They are owned by NFL teams. They are not owned by no government or community government or local government and stuff. They are all owned by these NFL teams. And you talk about NFL teams, you talk about 32 NFL teams in America. And not even all the stadiums were used. I mean, you're talking about how many stadiums? A lot of great stadiums were not even used in this tournament. And the biggest stadium that they used in this tournament, I think, was the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, my team stadium, which is the capacity is about 80-something thousand, but they can go all the way to 100,000. And if you want to talk about the biggest stadiums in the United States, surprisingly, which a lot of people didn't know, they are not even NFL team stadiums. They are the college football team stadiums. Are you kidding me? The college, the university schools, their stadiums are the biggest stadiums that you find in the United States. I mean, one in mind, the biggest one I think is the Michigan, University of Michigan, which they nicknamed the Big House. The Big House has a capacity of over 100 and I think close to 120,000. Then you have Texas, which is also over 100,000. Then you have Ohio State, which is also over 100,000. Alabama, Indiana. I mean, you can go down the list. And these are college stadiums. These are not even NFL professional football stadiums. These are college stadiums, which are bigger than the NFL stadiums that the people who came to the United States came to witness. So just imagine if they had gone to the Big House, University of Michigan, and see that humongous stadium sitting down there. And all these Europeans, on social media now commenting and praising and how they've enjoyed the trip and so on, so which is good. Because they said they never knew. All they saw and all they heard through their media in Europe was all this negativity about crime in America and people being killed and dying and all that stuff. And they came here and found out this is one of the most peaceful places, well organized. Well organized. I mean, sporting event with luxury, whatever your money can afford. That's up to you. If you want to spend 5,000, as a matter of fact, the average ticket for the games from the opening all the way to the, I think, semifinals was about $7,000. And then the finals itself, I think the finals itself, average ticket was about $12,000. And then all the way to 30,000, 60,000 to 70,000. And then those who have the big money, I mean, those who buy the box, the suites, close to the where they present the World Cup and all that stuff, the front row seats. I think I heard some companies sold about tickets ranging from $2 million to $4 million for those suites. So this tells you why America sporting events gross a lot of money. Because people here have the money to spend, big organizations, big companies, they buy these suites, and then you have individual wealthy athletes, celebrities, musicians, movie producers and all this. With all these billionaires, they can afford to spend this money, which is nothing to them. And this is why American sporting events is big and huge and gross a lot of money. Because where else are you going to go do? FIFA is going to go organize this sporting event and going to gross about $15 billion. Where? The last one was 7.4 or so billion. This one doubled it. Doubled it with some change. Where else are you going to do that? Are you going to do that in Europe? You're not going to get that much money there. You're going to do that where? In China? Heck no. Where? India? Heck no. Where? Africa? Where else? It's only in Northern America. That is where you can hold an event like this by FIFA and you're going to make that much money. As a matter of fact, I saw it on social media. A friend of mine sent me one clip where Europeans are now calling for UEFA Cup final should be held in the United States. I know it was just a teaser. They were just making jokes and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, if it's about the money, then you can also understand why FIFA wouldn't hesitate to host almost every World Cup in the United States. Because they're going to make their money. We're talking about a country that even soccer, football, is not the number one, even not the number two, not number three, love sporting event in America. NFL, is the number one. Then you have basketball, then you have baseball, then hockey, So we're not even talking about a sporting event. That's why a lot of people felt that this was going to go fall flat in the United States because Americans are not known to be loving, football. And guess what? Americans not even known for loving football came out in droves and supported this tournament and made it the biggest and the greatest World Cup ever held. Even though this is not the number one sporting event in the United States, it's able to make this game big and bigger in the United States and showcased it to the world. Where you saw the stadiums. Stadiums with this Jumbotron TVs and things that you don't see in Europe and any other part of the world. This is common in the United States. And you see people on social media talking about how they were surprised to see all of this stuff because of the negativity that they've heard about the United States sporting events and so on and so forth. And then coming here to find out Jumbotron, huge TV, flat screen, huge ones. You go to Dallas Stadium in Dallas, Texas. I think that's the biggest one. And then you talk about the one in LA, the SoFi Stadium. I mean, that stadium I think cost about 5 point something billion dollars. It's a fairly new stadium, built about 2, 3 years, about 3 years ago, I think so. Yeah, SoFi Stadium. As a matter of fact, they didn't even use the stadium in Las Vegas, which is a fairly new stadium. They didn't even use it. They didn't use a stadium in Baltimore. They didn't use the stadium in Cincinnati. They didn't use the stadium. I mean, a lot of stadiums were not even used. I mean, and these are great stadiums, all with capacity over 60, 70,000 were not used. As a matter of fact, America can host 3 World Cups at the same time when you talk about facilities, because the facilities are here. We already have them here. And all these are privately owned. So all you need to do is to convert them, the field, to grass for soccer tournament. That's all. If it costs a lot of money to do that, but that's what they did. Because most American sporting stadiums, football stadiums, have this artificial turf, and some, especially the domes, those with the domes, covered roof and all that stuff, which is very common here. So they have to convert them to artificial grass and all that stuff, So a lot of the stadiums in this country were not even used. A lot of them. A lot. I mean, we have over 50 stadiums with sitting capacity over 60, 70,000 that can be used in the United States at any given time with no questions asked about them. But guess what? A lot of them were not even used. And then you see people talking about how great these stadiums are, seeing all these luxury suites and, all that stuff. Things that you don't see in Europe and other parts of the world. You go to European sporting stadium, capacity, 35, 40,000 most. And they are not that huge. They are not that luxury compared to what is in here. So they came and found out, saw it for themselves with their naked eyes themselves, and came to see that, oh, this is what we've been missing. So you have it on social media with these Europeans posting all their stuff that they came to see in the United States. And the hospitality, Americans welcoming people from different parts of the world, those watching the games in restaurants, bars all across the country, and which was great. It showed how beautiful this game, that unites people. It showed all of that. And all these people came here and enjoyed the game. That's the most important thing. Outside of all of that, they enjoyed it. And as a matter of fact, we enjoyed it too. I mean, if you didn't have tickets to go to the game, at least the atmosphere itself was great. And it wasn't just great in the United States, it was great in Canada. It was also great in Mexico, where it was booming all over the places, restaurants in Mexico, in Canada, hotels, everybody made money. Everybody made money. And that's the great thing about it. So it was a good thing. It was a very good thing for the world. And unfortunately, every great thing has to come to an end, and it ended last week. But there's one take that I think this World Cup also exhibited. And I'm now going to dive into that, especially with regards to how this World Cup was hosted. How you had 3 countries, Mexico, Canada, and the United States hosting, even though majority of the games were held in the United States. At least you had 3 countries, bordering countries. And now, looking at that structure, the way FIFA did this, I mean, this is something that I did a program about a year or 2 ago when they had the African Cup of Nations. And I said, look, the problem with Africa is that, 1, we don't have the infrastructure. 2, we don't have the money. And 3, even if we have the money, we have so many things that needs to be taken care of for the citizens of that continent. And for this notion, this idea that every 2 years, I think now they have changed it to fall in line with the World Cup, like 4 years, which is a great thing. We're going to have an African Cup of Nations where a country will have to spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to build new facilities, new stadiums, new infrastructure to accommodate this tournament. When these countries don't have the financial background to be able to spend this money, to me was absurd. It didn't make sense. I know there are a lot of people who love football in Africa and those, oh, what the heck are you talking about? Because, the government have to, no, I get that. If your government have the means to afford to spend that much money, and at the end of the day, after all these stadiums have been built, it's going to recoup that money. Because at the end of the day, this is about economics. These are investments. So if you're going to invest in these new stadiums, new infrastructure, then you should be able to recoup this money through either your local sporting teams after the event to be able to sell tickets, to generate enough revenue to cover the maintenance of these new stadiums, as well as also the cost of these new stadiums that the government is building. But unfortunately, you go across the continent and you look at most African countries, except one or two countries, that their local leagues generate enough revenue. Most African countries' local leagues are pretty much dead. They don't generate any revenue. You go down there, you go there on Sundays to a sporting event, and the stadiums are pretty much empty. So when your government spend all this money to build these new stadiums, spends about hundreds of millions of dollars, like what Cote d'Ivoire did, brought to the one that was held in Morocco. I mean, you spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and then after that, these stadiums sit empty. It doesn't make sense. So it's the best way for Africans to emulate what had just happened is to have a regional African Cup of Nations tournament. So you have like West Africa countries where 3 or 4 countries come together, because each country has its own national stadium and so they can, organize, maybe two stadiums from each country. That makes more sense. So you don't have to spend all this money by one country. And at the end of the day, when all is said and done, they cannot recoup that money. So they can emulate exactly what has happened, just happened in the World Cup. Maybe 4 countries, 3 countries, bordering countries, in each region, West Africa, East Africa, South and North Africa. So you organize these tournaments so that all these countries come together and host tournament. 4 countries, I think minimum for Africa is good, to host the tournament, rather than going by what has been going on for some years now. And to me, economically, it hasn't been successful for Africa, because you look at the amount of money that these countries spend to build these new stadiums, and then you look at the revenue that comes in, and most of these countries lack basic infrastructure. You don't have electricity in your countries, even good pipe-borne water in most African countries, and the roads, all this infrastructure problem. And then you're going to spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, to some extent, even close to $1 billion to build stadiums and create an infrastructure for an event that you cannot recoup your money through that investment after the event. That doesn't make economic sense. It doesn't make sense. And it's about time the African countries think about it economically. If your country can do that and generate that revenue, then fine. You can host it, but not at the backs of the citizens of your country. Because at the end of the day, most of these things are financed through the governments in most African countries. And pretty much all African countries. It's the government that finances them. See, that is the difference between what is going on here. In America, all these stadiums and most of these infrastructures, you have local government will chip in a little bit, but most of the stadiums are privately owned. And they are already being built. They are already there. So it doesn't cost them too much money. And at the end of the day, even when all is said and done, because of the revenue stream that comes after that, they even are able to recoup and even be profitable in the United States and Canada and Mexico, because of the way the system is set up here. So they can do it here. But you look at it, and you look at Africa and make most third world countries, it doesn't make economic sense. Especially for each country to be hosting African Cup of Nations. It doesn't make sense. It's about time they reconsider that thing and look at it economically. Because like I said, you're talking about investing hundreds of millions of dollars when you don't even have clean pipe-borne water. You don't even have electricity grade operating normal in your various African countries. But you're going to spend all this money to go and build a stadium for an event. And then after the event, you can't even recoup that money through revenue of your sporting events. It doesn't make economic sense. And it's about time they think about it. Because if you look down the hood of all of this, I mean, what happened right now, this World Cup that the FIFA made about $15 billion. The African countries that participated in this World Cup, according to FIFA, received in total about $153 million, which is good. About $153 million. I think Morocco got the biggest because they went all the way to the quarterfinals. You know, so I mean, FIFA has made a lot of money, but they made their money because of where this event was held. Now, looking back, like I said earlier, African countries now have to reconsider this CAF tournament. Instead of having one country hosting it, they should spread it around like 3 or 4 countries, bordering countries, close by, hosting it to make it more economical for these African countries, so that if they get profit out of it or whatever revenue that comes out of it, at least they can use that money to invest in their various African countries and their communities, rather than the government spending hundreds of millions of dollars like Cote d'Ivoire did the last time, like Morocco did, all coming from the government. And then after that, you can recoup that money. So you spend all this money on an event when your citizens can't even have the basic infrastructure that is needed for them to have a better life. That doesn't make economic sense. So from what I'm saying is that with this World Cup, it's about time for FIFA, CAF to reconsider, especially I'm talking about CAF, African Cup of Nations tournament, how it is organized, so that the African citizens will enjoy the game as well as also economically be more sensible for their various African countries and their citizens than just spending hundreds of millions of dollars on stadiums and other infrastructure that at the end of the day, when everything is said and done, they cannot recoup that money back. It doesn't make sense. So African governments and CAF and FIFA, developing your countries is more important, way, way more important than a one football tournament. I don't care how much you love football. By the end of the day, if you can get water, electricity, good infrastructure, and you don't have a football tournament, it is way better. At least it makes people's life better than to have a football tournament where you put all that money in there and people still suffering because of lack of infrastructure in your various African countries. All right, fellas, if it's Sunday, it is the Africa Weekly Talk. God bless you guys and have a great week. Thank you guys and peace and love.